Welcome, friends. This is our very first in hopefully a very long series of introducing you to the people of Zambia. This is my Zambian journey because if you've seen the very sweet documentary that John and Amber made, then hopefully, like me, you have fallen in love with the Zambian people. And after that documentary, many people were asking me, well, how did you even decide to help Zambia? And how did this all come to be? So I have decided to share my journey with you, and I'm going to have many beautiful stories, many hopefully inspirational minutes and moments together. I hope you'll stay with me on this Zambia journey. So my journey started in 1979. I was a very young mother. My husband was going to school at the University of Utah, and we were living in the university housing. I had one son, and he was a little baby. It's kind of a little bit difficult time of life to be a stay-at-home mom, if that's what you've chosen to do, because it's just you and your baby most of the days. And money was tight for us. We didn't have any loans or grants, or it was pretty much you just raised money and spent money on school. So I was in the mode of wanting to make more money, and I had this old black and white television set that my grandmother gave me. And although I loved it because it was from my grandmother and I didn't have very many things from her, I put it in the university shopper and hoped to make a little money off of it. And then kind of almost forgot that I put it in there until there was a knock on my door. And when I opened the door, there stood a very tall, very black man. And immediately I was intrigued. I just stood there staring, I'm sure, and he said, "Madam, I am here to see the television set." So I said, "Oh, yes, the television set. It's just right over here. So where are you from?" And he said, "Madam, I am from Zambia." And I thought to myself, Zambia? Where's Zambia? And as I'm thinking, he must have read my thoughts, because he said, "Madam, when you take the African continent, the very bottom is South Africa. And then you travel up and you go to Botswana. And you travel up and you go to Zimbabwe. You travel a little further and you will be to Zambia. And that is my country, my home." And he said, "The television set isn't really for me. It's for my wife. She is here all alone. She doesn't go to school. She's missing her family very much. And I'm hoping that the television set will help." And I said, "Well, I'd love to meet your wife." So here began a most beautiful friendship. Her name was Ruth, and she and I, it's interesting. It's one of those kind of people, when you meet them, you almost feel like you knew them from somewhere else. We just immediately hit it off, and although she was very different than me, I was intrigued because, I loved the jungle and I loved National Geographic, and I wanted to know all about elephants and giraffes, and she made me think about the people. I'd never thought about the people. I never thought about how hard life was for some people. But when you learn these stories and you feel of her pain for her family, for her loved ones, and it makes you appreciate what you have so much more. And she said, "Peggy, I know, you always want to know about the animals, but I want to tell you that life is very hard in the jungle. You can't live in the jungle. We call it the bush. And if you live in the bush, it's very hard to grow food. It's very hard to rely on the rains. Your children will be hungry. People in the bush are hungry. People in the bush want to come to the city. They think, oh, if I could come to the city. So they'll pack a little mealie meal in a bag, and they'll put it on their back, and they'll walk for days to get to the city. But just to find out that when they get to the city, there's no jobs. Life in the city is hard. They still don't have food to eat. Everything is hard in Zambia. Should always remind me, everything is hard in Zambia. But I'm an American student, young, starting my family. It didn't really mean anything to me other than I loved our friendship. Many times she was a bit of a mothering type, and she was always trying to tell me what was the best way to clean my house, what was the best way to do this or that. And one of the things I learned at the very beginning of this whole friendship was how to carry my baby on my back. She was always saying, you American women, how can you do anything carrying the baby here? She said, no, the baby must be on your back. So she got a sheet, she folded a sheet, she did all this, and she wrapped this sheet around my back, and I carried Jacob on my back, and I was able to do a lot of things. That was just one of just many stories, and we just formed a beautiful friendship. And then came a really difficult time because, of course, they had to go back after her husband, Lakeness. Truthfully, I don't remember if he was getting his master's or his doctorate or whatever he was getting. He was going to school here, and his country had sent him here to go to school. I didn't know much about I didn't know when Zambia got their independence. I didn't know about the British colonization. I didn't know, this is just a friend, and she's telling me about her home. But when we said goodbye, I believe that was when I really started to want to know more. I would receive letters from her. She just couldn't go back to Zambia. She didn't want to raise her family there. It was just too dire, too remote, it was very difficult, so they ended up in South Africa. For 20 years, we wrote letters back and forth, and she described South Africa to me. So now here began a new country in my life, and I knew nothing about the apartheid. I knew nothing about how different countries in Europe would come down and colonize different countries in Africa. So if you're in South Africa, it is actually the Dutch that came down, and so if you live in South Africa, people there speak Dutch. And anyway, I was just really interested. In fact, there came a time probably when she was living there, maybe about 10, 15 years, because I'm also trying to kind of set in your mind this 40 years ago, people didn't travel like they travel now. We didn't have internet. We didn't have phones. There wasn't even a way to call until they finally somehow got a cable under the ocean to get a telephone call from South Africa to Utah. And when she finally, the first time I remember when she was able to call me, it was so amazing. I was thinking, I'm talking to you, and you're in South Africa. It was just an amazing journey of technology too. I'll be talking a lot about the technology and how it changed. And how at the beginning when I met her, I never thought I would go to Africa. That was out of the question. I think I had flown on an airplane once, and that was when I went back east to be a nanny when I was just out of college. And it wasn't travel like we have travel now. So this letter writing we were doing, it would take maybe a month, maybe 2 months, I mean at least a month. And then I would get a letter and I'd write a letter and she'd wait 2 months, and even corresponding was really difficult. So, you know, this was the beginning of something big. I didn't know how big, but she was my friend, and that's all that mattered now.